Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take a deep, systematic look into your source material, the intellectual stack, and really try to extract that critical knowledge and make these dense concepts, well, a lot more accessible. Today, we are wrestling with a question that sits beneath, literally every single statement you have ever made. It's not really about what you know, it's about how you know it. And, maybe more importantly, whether you can ever be absolutely certain of it.
Yeah, that's the big one, the certainty part.
Think about it. Think about the things you say every day, the things you treat as, completely unshakable. I know my own name.
Or your own history, where you grew up.
Right. Or I know 2 + 2 = 4. You know the laws of physics, at least well enough to walk around without constantly second-guessing gravity.
We just take them for granted. They feel like bedrock.
Exactly. We assert these things with so much confidence. But what happens when you start to apply just a little bit of intellectual pressure?
They can start to feel a lot less like bedrock and more like sand.
And that's where we're going today. We're entering the field of epistemology.
Which is, just the fancy philosophical term for the study of knowledge itself.
So our mission for this deep dive is to tackle that core challenge. Is certain knowledge even possible? Or is everything we hold dear just, well, probable, doubtful?
Always open to being revised later.
We've got centuries of thinkers who have landed on both sides of this, some with radical confidence, others with this deep, deep skepticism. And we really need to unpack how they tried to build these systems of knowledge that could, withstand any intellectual earthquake.
And this is so much more than just some abstract, academic game.
Right.
Because the standard of justification you demand for your knowledge, that really dictates how you live your life.
How so?
Well, if you demand absolute certainty for everything, you might never act on anything. But if you demand too little justification...
You become gullible. You'll believe anything.
Dangerously gullible. Yeah. So understanding epistemology helps you find that crucial middle ground between paralyzing doubt and just reckless confidence.
So where do we even begin?
We have to start with a foundational definition. Before we can talk about the certainty of knowledge, we have to agree on what we're even calling knowledge in the first place.
Okay, let's establish the ground rules.
For millennia, philosophers have kind of relied on this one traditional definition.
Yeah.
It's been endlessly debated and tweaked, of course, especially in the last century.
And that's it.
That knowledge is justified true belief. Or JTB for short.
JTB.
Okay. It's a beautifully simple phrase. But it sets up these 3 necessary conditions for any claim to knowledge. And if any one of these 3 fails, the whole claim just fails.
So this is basically the checklist we use, whether we realize it or not, when we're evaluating any kind of information that comes our way.
Precisely. Whether it's the news, a scientific paper, something a friend tells you.
Yeah.
So let's start with the simplest one, the most psychological condition. Belief. To know something, let's just call a proposition P, you have to first believe P.
That's the subjective part.
It's the subjective hurdle, exactly.
Yeah.
If you don't really care whether water boils at 100 degrees Celsius, or if you actively think it's false, you can't logically turn around and claim to know it.
Right. It has to be internalized.
Yeah. The belief part is there to rule out cases where someone just, states the truth by accident, or reads it off a teleprompter without actually thinking it's true.
So if I'm on a game show, guessing on a multiple choice question, and I just randomly pick C, and it happens to be correct, I fulfilled the truth condition, which we'll get to, but I didn't fulfill the belief one because I didn't actually hold that answer as true in my mind. It was just a lucky guess.
That's a perfect way to frame it. That's exactly what it excludes. But, the real philosophical heavy lifting starts with the next condition, truth.
The objective hurdle.
The objective hurdle. Your belief has to actually match up with reality. Like you said, if you sincerely, with all your heart, believe the earth is flat, you've met the belief condition, for sure.
But that sincerity doesn't matter.
It's completely irrelevant if the proposition itself is false. A sincere belief in something false is just a mistake, no matter how passionately you hold it.
This makes it so clear why knowledge isn't just about personal conviction. It needs that external anchor. It needs to connect to the real world.
Yes.
So an ancient astronomer, let's say Ptolemy, who, based on the best observations he had at the time, believed the sun revolved around the earth. That was a highly justified belief for the 2nd century.
For his time, absolutely.
But from our view now, because the proposition itself was factually wrong, we can't say he knew it. He had a justified belief, but not justified true belief.
That's the tension, exactly. And that tension brings us to the third part, and this is the most philosophically explosive component, justification.
Okay, this is the big one.
This is the mechanism that's designed to roll out luck.
Yeah.
So if you guess the winning lottery numbers, your belief that those specific numbers would win was true.
And you believed it, I guess, if you got the ticket.
Right. But it wasn't knowledge. It was just an accidental truth, a fluke. Justification demands that you have a reliable, non-accidental path to that truth.
So justification could mean a lot of different things. It could be a logical proof
Empirical evidence from a lab.
or, the reliable testimony of 100 eyewitnesses. The whole deep dive really hinges on what counts as good reasons.
It absolutely does. Let's use a slightly more complex example. Imagine you walk into a room and you see a clock on the wall that's stopped at 3:00 p.m.
Okay.
You look at your watch, you see it's 3:40 p.m., and you form the belief the time is 3:40 p.m. Now, your belief is true, and you believe it.
And I have a reason I looked at the clock.
What if, and you don't know this, that clock has been broken for weeks, and you just happen to look at it at the one exact moment it matched the actual time?
Uh-huh. So my belief was true, and I thought I had a reason, but my justification was it was faulty. It was an accident.
It was unreliable. Your belief didn't really flow from the facts of the situation. It's just a lucky coincidence.
Wow.
Exactly. This kind of problem, where a belief is true and justified, but the link between them is accidental, is famously known as a Gettier problem.
Named after the philosopher Edmund Gettier.
Right. And it basically forced philosophers to try and strengthen that justification part. It's not enough to have good reasons. You need something like non-accidental, undefeated justification.
Which sounds a lot harder to get.
It is. So this JTB model, it perfectly frames our mission for today. Can we ever have justification that is so strong that it is certain? I mean, beyond any possible doubt.
Or is the best we can ever hope for just fallible knowledge?
The kind of knowledge that's based on the best evidence we have right now, but always comes with that little asterisk that says, subject to change.
And if we insist on that perfect, unassailable justification,
then the vast majority of our claims to knowledge they vanish. And that is precisely the door that the skeptics come walking right through.
Okay, so if knowledge needs that super strong justification, then skepticism is the whole philosophical tradition dedicated to showing that, well, our justification is never, ever strong enough.
Right. And skepticism isn't just, someone being casually doubtful.
It's not just being cynical.
Not at all. It's a systematic, really rigorous stress test for our most basic, taken-for-granted assumptions about the world.
It's like an intellectual crucible.
That's a great way to put it. By throwing these challenges at us, skeptics force us to define exactly how strong our justification has to be. And they expose how much we're really just relying on, faith.
Faith in what?
Faith in the reliability of our instruments, our own mind, our own senses.
And the second we try to justify even the simplest claim, like, I know I'm sitting in a chair right now,
the skeptic immediately jumps in and points out all the ways you could be deceived, all the ways your confidence could be undermined.
And those sources of deception, they hit the most fundamental systems we use every single second.
They really do. Our senses, for one, are famously unreliable. We know for a fact that optical illusions work by feeding our brain information that is just demonstrably false.
People mistake a stick for a snake or see a mirage of water on a hot road.
All the time. So if our basic five senses, our main interface with reality, can trick us in these simple everyday moments, how can we possibly trust them for the really complex foundational knowledge we need for, say, science or history?
And it's not just our senses pointing outward. Our internal systems are just as shaky.
Oh, absolutely. Memory, for instance. We rely on it for almost everything we know about the past, but it's notoriously reconstructive. It gets distorted.
Ask 5 siblings to tell you about a childhood vacation.
You get 5 completely different stories, and every single person will be absolutely sincere.
Even our own reasoning can go wrong. We all commit logical fallacies without even realizing it. So our internal justification process is flawed too.
And the skeptic takes these little flaws, these minor cracks, and blows them up into a radical full-scale challenge, usually through these clever thought experiments.
Right, the ones designed to show that our immediate justification, what I see and feel right now, is just not good enough to prove that we're in actual reality.
The classic one that always makes people uncomfortable is so simple.
How do you know you're not dreaming right now?
Exactly. The power of the dream argument, which Descartes used so famously, is that when you're inside a vivid dream, the experience feels completely real.
You're not usually stopping and saying, this seems like a simulation.
No. The sounds, the feelings, the logic of the dream world, it's all perfectly consistent until you wake up.
And that's the intellectual trap, isn't it? The evidence you have for being awake while you're awake, the clarity, the consistency, is the exact same quality of evidence you have while you're dreaming.
Yes. So if the quality of the experience itself can't tell you whether you're in the real state or the false one, then our entire reliance on sensory experience as justification is, well, it's fatally weakened.
If the experience of reality can be perfectly simulated by my own brain, how can I ever provide justification that proves this experience is the real one without just pointing to the experience itself, which is circular?
And that leads us straight to the ultimate stress test, the evil genius, or the modern version, the simulation scenario.
Descartes' evil demon.
Right. He imagined an all-powerful, malicious demon whose only job was to deceive him about absolutely everything. Today, we just update that.
The Matrix, a brain in a vat.
How do you know you're not a brain in a vat or living inside some incredibly advanced computer simulation where every single input you receive is being manufactured and fed to you?
And this is where it ties right back to JTB, to justified true belief.
It does.
If we have to admit that this kind of systematic deception is at least a logical possibility, and it is,
It is. You can't logically disprove it.
then the level of justification you need for certain knowledge becomes almost infinite. To be certain, you'd need justification that rules out the possibility of a supercomputer tricking you.
And the skeptic just says, you can't do that. You can't do it without using the very senses and reasoning that might be part of the deception. Therefore, certainty is impossible.
So is that it? Game over.
Well, it's important to see the different levels of doubt here. If you really take the simulation idea to heart, you can fall into what's called global skepticism.
Meaning you can't know anything for sure.
Anything, not your name, not your past, not even that 2 + 2 is 4, if the simulation is powerful enough to manipulate the laws of logic themselves.
Which sounds like a recipe for just total intellectual paralysis.
It is, which is why very few philosophers are actual global skeptics. It's not a very livable position.
So what's the alternative?
Most people, if they're being intellectually honest, are forced to be local skeptics.
Okay, so you're skeptical about some things, but not everything.
Exactly. This position says, okay, maybe we can know some things with certainty. Usually things related to our own internal immediate experience, like I know that I am doubting right now.
You can't doubt that you're doubting.
But you might remain deeply skeptical about the true nature of the external world, or about, God or morality or complex historical facts, where the justification is always going to be a bit patchy.
So local skepticism is actually useful.
It's incredibly valuable. It forces us to be intellectually honest. When a scientist says we know the universe is expanding, they're making a claim based on an immense amount of justification.
But the skeptic is there to remind them.
To remind them that this is not certain in the same way that I am here now is certain. It's a crucial stress test. It makes sure we reserve that special label of knowledge for beliefs that are truly powerfully justified.
So the skeptical challenge leaves us in a really tough spot. If our senses can't be trusted, if experience is potentially a simulation, where on earth do we turn for certainty?
This is the exact problem that forced this huge split in philosophy, creating two very different paths to find knowledge.
This is the big one.
This is the legendary rationalism versus empiricism debate. It dominated Western philosophy for centuries. Both sides were trying to answer the skeptic, but they look for the source of reliable knowledge in completely opposite places.
The rationalists looked inward to the mind.
And the empiricists looked outward to the world.
Okay, let's start with rationalism. Certainty through reason.
The core claim of rationalism, championed by people like René Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz, is that we can get to genuine, certain knowledge using reason alone.
Independent of our messy, unreliable senses.
Completely independent of sensory experience. For them, the mind is not a blank slate. It comes pre-equipped with certain innate structures or ideas.
The intellectual software.
The software, exactly. The tools you need to understand certain universal truths, and you discover them just through careful, systematic thinking.
And they called this a priori knowledge.
A priori, which just means from the former. It's knowledge you can have before or apart from any specific experience. And these truths are considered necessary truths.
Meaning they couldn't possibly be false.
Right. Denying them leads to a logical contradiction. You don't need to go out and check the world to see if they're true.
So give us some of these rock-solid examples that the rationalists would point to.
Well, geometry is the classic rationalist stronghold. Think about the Pythagorean theorem.
A squared plus b squared equals c squared.
We know that's true, not because we went out and measured every single right-angled triangle in the universe, which would be an empirical and an impossible task.
We know it because it can be logically proven.
It's logically deducible from the very definitions of what a triangle is, what a right angle is in Euclidean space. The proof itself guarantees the truth. You can't even imagine it being false without changing the basic rules.
So that certainty comes purely from the structure of reasoning itself.
Yes. Another powerful example is the syllogism. The logical form guarantees that if your premises are true, all humans are mortal, Socrates is a human, then the conclusion
Socrates is mortal
has to be true. That certainty has nothing to do with whether Socrates is actually standing in front of you. It's all in the logic.
And Descartes, he took this idea to the absolute limit. After he did his whole systematic doubt thing, doubting his senses, his memories, the whole world,
Evil genius, yeah.
he realized there was one single thing he could not possibly doubt,
The act of doubting itself.
which led him to his famous bedrock certainty, cogito ergo sum.
I think, therefore I am. For him, that was the one unshakable foundation he could use to try and rebuild all of human knowledge.
So that's the great strength of rationalism. It gives you this little island of absolutely certain knowledge that is totally immune to skeptical attacks on your senses.
Exactly. Even if you're in the matrix, the rules of logic still seem to apply.
Yeah.
And the certainty of your own immediate experience, that you are, in fact, having an experience, that holds firm.
But the big challenge is its scope, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can pure reason really tell us much about the contingent facts of the actual world?
That's the problem.
Can I use logic alone to figure out that water freezes at a certain temperature, or that the earth is round? It seems like rationalism gives you certainty, but only about these abstract, formal truths, not about concrete, observable facts.
And that is exactly where the empiricists come in and say, hold on a minute.
Right. Empiricism, knowledge from experience, but maybe that's always fallible.
The empiricist camp, and here we're talking about giants like John Locke, George Berkeley, David Hume, they totally rejected the rationalist idea of having all this innate knowledge.
For them, the mind starts out as a tabula rasa.
A blank slate. And all genuine factual knowledge about the world has to be built up piece by piece from sensory experience.
So if rationalism is all about deduction from necessary truths, empiricism is about induction from observation.
You got it. We start by seeing, hearing, touching, and then we form generalizations based on that data.
This sounds a lot like the modern scientific method.
It aligns with it perfectly. You form a hypothesis, you conduct repeatable experiments, you gather observations, and if the data consistently backs up your theory, you call it knowledge.
So someone like John Locke, he argued that all our big, complex ideas are ultimately built from simple little ideas we get through our senses.
Sensation or reflection, yeah. And the knowledge is reliable because it's grounded in that direct experience. But, and this is a huge but, this leads directly to accepting a crucial limitation.
Fallibility.
The acceptance of fallibility, yes.
So this is what you called the modest picture of knowledge. For an empiricist, certainty really only exists in definitions. You can be certain a bachelor is an unmarried man.
Because that's just a definition.
And when you start talking about facts about the world, like, will the law of gravity still work tomorrow? That knowledge can only ever be probable.
It's intensely tested. It's overwhelmingly supported. But it's always contingent. And David Hume delivered the most devastating critique of this with his problem of induction.
Right. We all believe the sun will rise tomorrow, but not because we have a logical proof. We believe it because it has risen every single day in the past. We're inducing a general law from past observations.
But the skeptic, Hume, points out that the link, the necessary connection between the past and the future, is just an assumption. It's based on habit, not logic.
There's no logical contradiction in imagining the sun just not rising tomorrow.
None whatsoever, and that's the empiricist's big compromise. Science gives us this incredible, reliable, powerful knowledge. It lets us predict and manipulate the universe. But in exchange, we have to give up the hope of absolute, non-revisable certainty about the external world.
So our justification is strong because it works. It has predictive power.
But it is, in principle, always breakable by the next unexpected piece of evidence.
So to contrast the two, rationalism gives you a small, abstract island of certain knowledge, logic, math that can survive radical doubt.
While empiricism gives you a massive, concrete continent of reliable, powerful knowledge science, facts, that is always fundamentally open to correction.
Okay, so we've looked at the sources of knowledge, reason, and experience. But once we have all these justified beliefs, how do we organize them? If you picture all of your knowledge as this giant structure,
What's the architecture?
yeah, how do the individual bricks, our beliefs, fit together?
This is a really interesting debate about the architectural models for knowledge.
Mm.
We're shifting from how we get our beliefs to how we hold them together. And philosophers have proposed two main metaphors for this:
A building and a web.
the sturdy building and the mutually supporting web.
Okay, let's start with the building. Foundationalism.
Foundationalism is the sort of intuitive approach. It was heavily favored by rationalists like Descartes, who were really trying to defeat skepticism once and for all.
The idea is that some beliefs are basic.
Some beliefs are basic, they're self-justifying, they don't depend on any other beliefs to be valid. These are the bedrock, the literal foundation of the building.
And all our other beliefs are built on top of those.
All other justified beliefs are non-basic, and they are built, logically or inferentially, on top of those secure starting points.
The strength of this model is pretty obvious. It stops that problem of infinite regress.
Explain that.
The idea that every belief needs another belief to justify it, which needs another, and you just go on forever.
An endless chain. Foundationalism just stops the chain. It says, nope, some beliefs are just known. They don't need any further justification.
But the whole thing rests on what you count as a basic belief. What's actually strong enough to hold up the entire weight of human knowledge?
That's the challenge. The traditional candidates are those immediate internal certainties we talked about. I exist. I am currently sensing the color red. Or a clear, immediate logical truth.
But hang on, how narrow is that foundation? If my foundation is just the absolute certainty that I am having this experience right now, how do I logically build a bridge from that to something practical, like that is my car parked down the street?
That's the core problem.
It seems like an incredibly narrow foundation for the huge, complex building of everyday life.
And classical foundationalism really struggled to bridge that gap. Descartes felt certain of his own existence, sure. But moving from the certainty of I am experiencing this to the external world actually caused this experience exactly as I perceive it, well, that required some massive and very controversial logical leaps.
So the skeptic just attacks the building by kicking at the foundation.
Exactly. If the skeptic can show that any of those supposedly basic beliefs, even a simple perception, could be tainted by doubt,
Through the dream argument or the simulation.
then the whole system built on top just comes crashing down. Foundationalists have to work incredibly hard to defend that bottom layer.
Which seems really difficult. So what's the other model? The web.
Because of that difficulty, a lot of thinkers just rejected the building model completely and proposed coherentism instead.
Okay.
In this view, there is no special privileged class of basic beliefs. Instead, knowledge is structured like a huge three-dimensional web or a net.
So a belief isn't justified because it rests on some solid anchor.
No, it's justified because it fits coherently into the massive network of all the other beliefs you hold. The justification is holistic. It comes from the mutual support among all your beliefs.
Okay, give me an example.
Think about the belief that water is HO. That's not justified by one single foundational experiment.
Right.
It's justified because that belief coheres with everything we know about chemistry, physics, spectroscopy, thermodynamics, the history of science. All those different strands support that one belief, and in turn, that belief supports them.
So if you tried to pull out the H-ear belief.
You'd have to unravel thousands of other connecting strands in the web of science. It's incredibly robust because it's so well integrated.
That makes a lot of sense for complex modern knowledge like climate science. Our knowledge that the climate is changing isn't based on one temperature reading.
Not at all.
It's based on the coherence of ice core data, atmospheric measurements, predictive models, satellite images, historical records. It's the collective mutual support that makes the belief so strong.
And coherentism also describes the dynamic nature of knowledge perfectly. If a new, powerful piece of evidence comes along, it creates a tension in the web.
It doesn't fit.
So the system adjusts. Beliefs that no longer cohere are either revised or they're just abandoned, which allows the whole system to heal and strengthen its connections.
But this brings up the classic objection, right? The isolation problem.
Go on.
What if a group of people builds a perfectly complex, internally consistent, and highly coherent web of beliefs, like an elaborate conspiracy theory that just happens to be completely disconnected from reality?
That is the vital question. If coherence is the only thing that matters, then in theory you could have two completely contradictory yet internally coherent systems of belief, and both would count as justified knowledge.
So how do they solve that?
Well, most modern coherentists have to admit that while coherence is the main structure, the web has to be anchored to the world somehow, usually through sensory input points.
But they don't want to call those points foundations.
They deny that those points are fundamentally more secure than any other belief in the web. So the debate just shifts. How tight does that connection to the world need to be for the web to count as knowledge and not just some internally consistent fantasy?
Wow. Okay, so this whole deep dive has been about this demand for absolute certainty, and the conclusion seems pretty clear, except for a few really narrow areas, like logic or my own self-existence.
Absolute certainty about the external world seems almost impossible to get.
So how do we move forward? How do we still claim to know anything at all?
We move forward by adopting a standard that's robust enough to function in the real world, but humble enough to recognize its own limits. And this is the concept of fallibilism.
And you said this is pretty much the consensus now.
It's become the dominant view in contemporary philosophy, and you could argue it's the philosophy that underpins the entire project of modern science.
So what is fallibilism?
It's actually deceptively simple. It just says that we can have knowledge even if that knowledge might, in principle, turn out to be wrong someday.
So knowledge doesn't require 100% unbreakable certainty.
Exactly. It doesn't need to be incorrigible. It just requires justification that is so strong, so reliable, and so testable that we are warranted in treating the belief as true.
While staying open to the possibility that future evidence might force us to change our minds.
Yes. This immediately solves the paralysis problem that global skepticism creates. It lowers the bar from absolutely certain down to reliably justified and functionally true.
So what does knowledge require in this new framework?
In the fallibilist view, it's not perfect certainty. It's three things: good evidence, a reliable process for getting that evidence, peer-reviewed science, not reading tea leaves,
And a readiness to revise.
and the constant readiness to revise when new, better evidence appears. The justification just has to be good enough to explain the data and to outperform any competing theories.
This completely changes how we view scientific progress.
It does.
The fact that Newtonian physics was eventually replaced by Einstein's relativity doesn't mean that every scientist in 1890 was just wrong about everything.
Not at all. It means they had the most powerful, the most tested, the most reliable knowledge available to them at the time. Their knowledge was true relative to the justification they had.
Even if it turned out to be limited in scope.
Right. And the ability to revise our beliefs in this view, that's not a failure of knowledge. It's a feature. It's what makes knowledge this living, dynamic process of continually improving our models of the world.
So we know the Earth orbits the Sun because the justification, the whole web of celestial mechanics and orbital equations is just overwhelmingly strong.
Even if some unimaginable discovery in the future requires us to make a subtle tweak to that model.
So this shift from demanding certainty to requiring reliability and intellectual humility, this seems like the most practical takeaway for anyone listening.
I think it is. It allows us to act with confidence based on the best current evidence, while still keeping that essential philosophical humility to change our minds.
But there's another kind of certainty we have to talk about, one that doesn't really play by these rules.
Yes, we have to address that entirely different category of certainty that often bypasses the public rules of logic and empirical proof.
You mean inner certainty?
Inner certainty, the kind you often find in religious, spiritual, or profound moral traditions.
So we're talking about these subjective, personal knowledge claims. I know God exists. I know this is the morally right thing to do.
Or even, I know this piece of music is beautiful. These are claims that are usually backed by an intense inner conviction, not by external evidence you can put on a lab bench.
And this kind of knowing is often described as, what, experiential?
Yes, it's based on revelation, or faith, or a direct spiritual encounter. It operates on a whole different epistemology. It often claims to be higher or more direct than the kind of knowledge we get from our fallible senses or the rules of logic.
Like a mystic might claim to see or taste reality directly.
Bypassing all the concepts and just arriving at truth instantly.
And when a person feels that level of profound, intense inner conviction, to them, it feels like absolute certainty. It just sidesteps all the skeptical anxieties we've been talking about.
For that individual, the belief is entirely self-justifying. And that's the core tension we have to look at. The conviction is subjectively certain, but epistemology usually demands public justification.
And the questions that raises are immediate.
And critical. First, the reliability question. How can we tell the difference between a genuine spiritual insight and a really powerful psychological projection or a hallucination?
And then there's the conflict problem. What do we do when different people from different traditions report conflicting inner certainties?
If one person is certain of a divine truth that another person is equally certain is false, inner certainty by itself gives you no way to figure out who's right.
We also have to think about the scope of it. Is this inner knowing just private knowledge?
Is it valid only for the person who had the direct experience? Maybe it offers them personal wisdom and guidance, and that's it.
Or does it claim to be a universal truth?
Does it claim that it should apply to everyone, regardless of their own inner experience?
In the moment it makes that leap?
The moment inner certainty claims to be a public, universal truth like, this moral law applies to all people, it leaves the private realm. It enters the public square, where it has to, by definition, engage with the public standards of justification,
Empirical evidence, logical consistency.
coherence with other established facts. And this is the great philosophical tension in our modern world, that conflict between deeply felt personal certainty and public, shareable verification. It shows that this whole quest for knowledge is tied up with our deepest values.
Okay, we have covered an enormous amount of ground here. We've gone from the definition of knowledge to the skeptical wrecking ball, and then all the ways philosophers tried to rebuild.
Using rational certainty, empirical reliability, coherent webs.
So let's try to synthesize this. Let's answer the question we started with. Is certain knowledge possible?
Well, our deep dive shows that the quest for certainty was successful, but in surprisingly limited areas. We found absolute confidence within the rules of logic, in mathematics, and in that immediate internal certainty of your own conscious experience.
Those are the unshakable foundations.
They seem to be, but for the vast majority of our lives, for our science, our history, our understanding of the world around us, we really have to adopt that fallibilist view.
We operate with a modest confidence. We accept that our knowledge is reliable, it's incredibly well justified, it's powerful.
But it's always, in principle, open to being revised.
And we also have to acknowledge that powerful, transformative conviction that comes from personal or spiritual certainty.
Right. And while that may not meet the public standards for universal proof, it clearly provides vital direction and meaning for the individual.
And skeptical doubt, it seems, remains our essential intellectual watchdog. It's there to stop us from getting arrogant or dogmatic about what we think we know.
Absolutely.
So what here, the real world relevance for you, the learner, is profound. This isn't just a theory. This stuff shapes how you act.
It really does. Think about politics or public policy. How sure does a government need to be about a new law or new health measure before they impose it?
Absolute proof is impossible.
So ethical action in the public sphere means you have to act on the best available evidence.
Yeah.
That's the fallibilist standard. You acknowledge the limits, and you build in ways to review and revise your policies rather than just clinging to a false sense of certainty.
It also changes how you consume information. If you hear a complex claim about history or economics, you shouldn't just ask, is it true?
You should be asking, what is the justification for that claim? And how well does it cohere with other known facts? You move from being a passive recipient to an active evaluator of the knowledge structure.
And critically, it changes how you judge other people. If a scientist or a politician changes their mind on a long-held belief.
The fallibilist doesn't see that as a sign of weakness or hypocrisy. If the justification for the old belief was good at the time, and the justification for the new, revised belief is even stronger,
Meaning new evidence came in.
then changing your mind isn't a flaw. It's an act of intellectual responsibility.
So the ideal middle ground, the thing that lets us function powerfully but responsibly in this complex, uncertain world, is this balance of confidence and humility.
We have to act. We have to love, build, seek truth based on the best reasons we have right now.
We hold our beliefs strongly, but critically.
Recognizing that even our most robust knowledge is never a completely closed book.
So if you take one essential piece of wisdom from this whole deep dive into the quest for certainty, let it be the philosophical understanding that guides all productive action in a state of fallibility.
I know something, I might be wrong, and I am still responsible for how I think and live.
That's the key.
That's the wisdom to mull over.